Here at NEASC, we strive to keep students at the center of everything we do. And we look for opportunities to amplify student voice and empower students as authentic stakeholders in the accreditation process, as well as in their own academic, social, and emotional learning. I am pleased to introduce a kindred spirit in this mindset, our speaker today, Rosalind Wiseman, best-selling author, educator, and founder of Cultures of Dignity. Rosalind believes that young people are subject matter experts in their own lives, and adults must first listen to young people before giving them advice. For the last 20 years, she has spent her time collaborating with educators, parents, children, and teens as a teacher, thought leader, author, and media spokesperson on youth culture, ethical leadership, and the use of social media. She's the founder of Cultures of Dignity, an organization that shifts the way communities think about our physical and emotional well-being. Rosalind is the author of 2 New York Times bestsellers, including Queen Bees and Wannabes, the basis for the movie and the Broadway show Mean Girls. Her most recent works include books for parents on supporting their children through distance learning and curriculum guides to support social justice in middle school and high school. Thank you to all of you who submitted questions today. We are going to have a lot to cover. Rosalind has a lot to share with us, but we are going to leave some time for Q&A at the end. And so we look forward to getting to those, as many of them as we can. As young people navigate a constantly changing educational environment, we know a few things are certain. Supportive relationship and social skills are critical to emotional well-being and academic engagement. These skills are not soft skills as they can be so often considered. We're really looking forward to spending the next hour with Rosalind, learning how to truly work with students as partners in their social emotional learning and creating cultures of dignity in schools and communities. Thank you so much, and I'll turn it over to you, Rosalind.
Hi, good morning. I honestly don't know if people are seeing my face as I'm looking at the panel, at the people coming in, but I'm seeing all these people that I know, and I'm so thrilled. So this space is, I can't believe it. I just can't believe it. So good morning and good afternoon and good evening, everyone from all over the world. Because we are in so many different places, I wanted us to just take a moment. It is 7:06 in the morning for me because I'm in Colorado. I just want us to sit quietly just for a moment and just be here together. I just be here together with all these wonderful people and know, even though we're doing this virtually, that we are surrounded by our colleagues and the vast amount of expertise that is on this webinar participating in community. So let's just take a moment to be here and focus and settle in. Okay, so as Kelly said, I'm the co-founder of Cultures of Dignity, and you might know me from the books that I've written that were mostly focused on parents about young people, like Queen Bees and Wannabes and Masterminds and Wingmen. But I started off my career, and I have been for the last 5 years, really focused about working in schools. And about 5 years ago, I decided to take a break from writing books and really focus on listening to young people, listening to teachers, listening, excuse me, to parents, administrators, and staff about what would a social emotional learning program look like that would have the best chance of being taken seriously by the community, by the students, by the parents, by the faculty, by the teachers, and that there are some really inherent challenges, no matter our amazing intentions, or no matter how much we might think that social emotional learning is important, that actually being able to implement it in a school can be incredibly challenging. So I have come here so eager today to share with you the work the insights that I have learned working in places all over the world, public schools, private schools, international schools, parochial schools, charter schools. I'm so excited to just be here to be in community with you, to share with you what I've learned and the insights that I've gained, the profound lessons I have learned about how to integrate social emotional learning concepts and context in a way that our communities feel is relevant and is reflective of what they need. So I want to tell you a little story about something that happened with me last week, which was I was working in preparation for working with a school in person, and I'm starting to do some things in person again. But in preparation, I always talk to the people that are in that community first, so they can inform me and advise me about how to bring the concepts I have into their schools. So I was talking to about a group of 10 people on a staff of a public school, and an art teacher said to me that over the summer, she had read all of these books about how to get ready for the mental and emotional needs of her students, because she knew that young people had been struggling. She had been reading about all of the challenges that we have. So she was reading all of these books that she could take those strategies and then implement them for her students for the fall. And what she said to me last week was that she was completely the one that needed to be taken care of. She was the one that was really short-tempered. She was the one that was getting really impatient. And so she wasn't able to implement the things that she had learned over the summer with these students that she cares so deeply about. And I thought that was such an honest and thoughtful acknowledgement of where teachers understandably can be. And so it's a really important moment, I think, for us to be able to share our stories of the lessons learned and the struggles and challenges that we're having. So, because I think, as I've sort of mentioned before, like I've begun to say, but this is the elephant in the room, is that social emotional learning is tough, and it's a tough sell sometimes to the students, even when they know that it's important. And even when there are teachers who know that it's important, how to do it in the classroom, how to do it on who should do it explicitly, how do we do it in an integrated way in the classroom is tough. And the other part is that social emotional learning can sometimes come across as unrealistic or patronizing and too simplistic to students. And that is the reason that we have to go to the students in our communities to have them work with us and inform us together in partnership to decide and figure out what it is that not only the content that we need, but more importantly, the context in which the students are operating, so that the social emotional skills that they're learning are relevant to them and they can see why they want to apply them and take a risk of being socially emotionally vulnerable to you in a classroom, to an advisory, to their peers. Why would they want to do that? Because they have to be able to see that they can apply it to their real lives. And so that is the spirit in which I come to you today, and all of the framing. It's a framing of which I want to approach for us today. So, all right. Oh my goodness, there are just so many people I know. I'm sorry, it's going to be very distracting to me. Okay, so every time I look in the chat, I'm going to be like, oh my gosh, there's another person. And I'm really looking forward to your questions. And in fact, we got some questions in advance, and so we are going to. And I've already prepared today for those as well. All right, so let's get started with, what are we doing and what's the framing? So I'm going to use, by the way, Prezi, which is a platform. One of the questions I was asked is, how do you use technology with social emotional learning? And Prezi is something that I do that allows me to feel like I'm still talking to you, I'm still presenting to you, and I have these things that are here for me so that I can speak and bring in the concept simultaneously. So this is called Prezi Video. All right, so one of the framings that we have that I want to just level set on is, what is the definition of happiness? Because happiness is not no conflict. Happiness is not everything being smooth. I want to redefine for us what happiness is, and then connect it to teachers and educators and having that and the experience of what we want in a learning environment. So happiness is meaning beyond oneself, a hope of success, not a guarantee, that you have meaningful social connection, that you have satisfying work, you're doing something that you're curious about, that you understand why you're doing it, and that you have a place to process and find peace. So this is a way of defining happiness. The other way I want us to look at this is the way a teacher, if we can think about this as our goals in the classroom, that a student would be able to have these experiences, and that a teacher would think about, this is what my goal is for the class. At some point that students are having this experience, I think it connects really well to our goals, frankly, for social emotional learning. Okay. But you are here. I have to move this, right? Because my head sometimes gets in the way of my Prezi. But the thing that about like, how do we get there? How do we get to this place of principles? I mean, excuse me, of happiness, the way that I defined it. So I'm going to talk to you about principles, and that principles are the how. So the mission of your school and the values that you have are the why, but the principles are the how. They guide our behavior, they guide our behavior and our actions and our thoughts. And so for me, principles are one of the most profound things that I've thought about in the last 5 years, because I've been very focused on tactics, on social emotional learning skills, things that we can deliver to students. But there's an infinite number of things that we can share with students, or scenarios and situations. And so principles give us this way of being able to apply more concrete social emotional skills. It's the step before it. And so the first principle we have is we want to commit to treating ourselves and others with dignity. You're here at this webinar to learn more about the way that we can think about dignity. So our first principle is committing to treating ourselves and others with dignity. The second principle we have is that no one knows everything. Together we know a lot. This webinar is an excellent example of that. So I have been working with young people for a very long time, but it does not make me an expert on your students. You are the expert on your students. So together we have a tremendous amount of knowledge that we can apply to this subject and to anything that we're trying to figure out. Listening is being prepared to be changed by what you hear. That is the principle that I'd like us to think about for listening, because we live in a culture that defines listening as talking over other people or waiting until they stop and then being able to say why they're wrong. So for social emotional learning, the principle of listening is being prepared to be changed by what you hear is profound. It does not mean you have to agree. It means that you go into something with that principle guiding your thoughts and your actions. We want to be easy on people and hard on ideas. This is a complex principle. So in general, the context for this principle is that we are usually very easy, or we're very hard on people. One of the questions I got was about cancel culture. You can't make a well-intentioned mistake, or you can't make a mistake and people doubt your intentions, or they doubt your credibility, they doubt everything about you. But when we're hard on people, it gets very easy for us, unfortunately, to not apply the rigor that we need to the very challenging problems and challenges that we have. And so if we can be easy on people and hard on ideas, then it allows us to be able to focus on the issues. Now I will say, and I'm not here to do a DEI webinar or to participate in one, but I will only say, and I know that you're going to be doing webinars after mine that are more focused on that. But here's an example of where a principle gets pretty complex, because when you're dealing with somebody who is doing something that denies your dignity, that they are expressing viewpoints that is a feeling of denying of your dignity, of your essential worth because of your identity, it gets very, very hard to be easy on that person. And so I really want to create space for the complexity of thinking about these kinds of ideas. We want to validate, don't relate. I'm going to show you an example of that later. But what we often think in education, especially with parents, by the way, or with young people, that we want to relate to them. Like, we've gone through your experience, we know what it's like to be you. But all to say right now, actually, we don't know what it's like to be other people. That actually goes into the framework of DEI as well. We don't know what it's like to be other people. And so it's really important to say to people, actually, to reframe the relation sometimes pursuit that we do, which is instead to say, you know what, I don't know what it's like to be you, but what I believe that you're going through and what I believe your experience is incredibly important. And I want to validate that. And so that principle can really reframe for people things in a really important way. We want to recognize that young people are subject matter experts of their lives. And so certainly, we do not know what it's like to be a young person going through a pandemic. We certainly do not we don't know what it's like to have grown up with no privacy and social media being able to, constantly target them to capture their attention and all of the complexities around that. We don't know what it's like. So we need to recognize that they really are the subject matter experts of their lives and work with them, again, to create programs that are relevant to them. And we need to focus on asking for help as a strength, not a weakness, as a principle. So in one of your previous webinars, and you had young people on the webinar, and they're talking about the experience of the pandemic and their mental health and their emotional wellness. Many of them talked about being and the importance of asking for help and seeing that as something that was a capacity for them. And I could not agree more. So these are our principles that I want us to think about in terms of giving us an overarching sort of umbrella for which social emotional learning can sit under. All right, next, I'm going to ask you a question. So my first question to you today, and I believe even when they're webinars that things should be interactive, is that I want to ask you, who did you respect when you were young and why? And if you want to write it down or think quietly, I'm actually going to give you 30 seconds to do this and to sit quietly. I would like for you to also, if you feel comfortable, writing it in the chat. So I'm going to give you 30 seconds to do that. Mm. Okay, I could just keep reading these and reading these. And you know, many of you have written my grandparents, my moms and teachers, my people in your family. And so what we really want to go to, because we've been all raised, and there are people from all over the world here, and in most cultures we have this adage of we need to respect our elders. But that is a complicated issue, and it has always been a complicated issue. I think it has become a more complicated issue for young people today. So I want to define for you all what respect means, coming from Latin. And I think I saw in the chat that one of you, your Latin teacher, was one of the people that you respected. Is that respect in Latin means to look back at and to admire somebody for their actions, for how they have behaved. And that means that respect is earned, that it is from this history, from this root of this word in this language, that respect is earned. In contrast, the word dignity is to be worthy. It means that you just inherently have it, and that dignity is a given. And so respect is tied to actions and how you have conducted yourself. And dignity is just something that you get, it is inherent. So here's the issue. When we are told that we should respect people like our teachers and our parents, it is supposed to be a given because of the position that they have. But there is an assumption within that they have acted in ways that merit that respect. And the complexity of our world is that sometimes people in positions of authority take away or try to take away the dignity of other people. And they use the position of respect that they have. They use the position of authority, the respect that that position gives them, the authority that that position gives them, to get away with taking away this, to take away the dignity of others. And young people know this. And it's one of those things that when we talk about and bring this to life, young people want to have this conversation. Now I want us to think about that, how many of us have in our schools the word respect on our walls, and we have it in our pillars, and we have it in our mission and our values, and we tell kids respect each other, and how complex that word is, because sometimes the word respect is used to actually demand obedience and compliance from young people. And in particular, when it is demanded by somebody who does not treat other people with dignity, young people disengage. They disengage from adults. They disengage from buying into whatever intrinsic motivations and values we're trying to teach them. They disengage from the school that they're attending. They disengage from the community of faith that they are attending and that they are a part of, because they don't feel safe. And one of the things that we have to acknowledge is I think they are right. And it really connects to Donna Hicks's conception of dignity, who she's been working on this issue and from a more of a political science lens for decades. And and her work in that field has been incredibly helpful to me. But I think in education, one of the things that we don't do is we don't like to acknowledge the messiness of our failings with young people, because we think if we do, then they're not going to take us they're not going to take us with credibility, that our authority will be taken away. And what I believe after many decades of working on this issue is that when we do acknowledge these differences, when we do acknowledge the messiness of these two words, that young people actually come forward to us and trust us more, because we are acknowledging the messiness of our communities. We are acknowledging the complexities of the relationships and sometimes the abuse of power that they experience. And when we don't do that, they're not going to take social emotional learning seriously. So as some of your people in your previous webinars have said, this is not about a particular program. This is not about doing one program which is better than another program, which is better than this, and we have to do this one thing. I don't believe that. What I believe is that we need to do this in all different kinds of ways, in integrated ways. But we have to have principles that guide the way in which we're going to implement whatever program we are going to do. And for me, one of the very fundamental things that we have to have is an acknowledgement of the difference between the words respect and dignity, and to use the word respect in the way that it is meant to be, so that it is powerful. And that when we're clear about it, young people will buy into using this word respect, and they will buy into using the word dignity. So with that, the next question I want to ask you with that thought is this: how does that person that you thought about when I asked you about who you respected when you were young and why, how does this person influence your work with young people? And I'm going to give you a little caveat, because I saw it in the chat, which is that a couple of people wrote, some of my teachers, and then put in parentheses, some of them. So some of the people that we were taught by we did not respect. And so I want you to think about, well, maybe how did that influence why you are teaching or how you are teaching today? So if you want to put that in the chat, that's fine. If you want to just think about it or write it down, totally fine, as a self-reflection. So please think about, how does this person influence your work with young people today? And I'll give you another 30 seconds. Mm-hmm. I really hope y'all are reading the chat here, because it's so powerful. My father said young people need love, respect, understanding, collaboration, and hard work. These are the elements of dignity that actually Donna Hicks has written about, and that really dignity for me. And I've spent years thinking about dignity in so many different ways with so many different people and thought leaders, is that it really comes down to acknowledgement of one's experience, acknowledgement that it's important. Having expectations, but giving you the support to be able to do it. There's a number in here of saying, I wanted to do it opposite of the teachers that I had that humiliated me when I was young. So these are powerful lessons. And I will say to you right now that one of the ways to be able to bring teachers who are less enthusiastic about social emotional learning, more focused on getting through the curriculum, are uncomfortable with doing social emotional learning in their advisories or just integrating it into their classrooms, that if you have 15 minutes in a faculty meeting to do the exercise that I just did with you and ask them, how does this person influence how you show up today? this can be and often is a powerful, powerful exercise for teachers to remember why they got into teaching and what their strengths are. What is it in their core that makes them want to teach? And so I encourage you to think about, this might be an activity that you could do in a faculty meeting to have them remember, no matter what program you're doing, whatever social emotional learning program you're doing, that this brings us back to the core of why we teach. And it brings us back to remembering that relationships are the essential connection to having young people continue with their education and to continue doing things that are challenging for them. So thank you so much for this. And we're going to make sure to save the chat because I think this is so incredibly important. So let's see how we can apply this. Because it's, we've got these like high level concepts, and then we need to make things more granular and more specific as we do things to apply them to social emotional learning. So I want to talk about and connect dignity in respect to emotional regulation. So as I said in the very beginning with my story about the teacher who said, like, I am the one that's not emotionally regulated. I'm the one who's, who's losing their patience and not acting the ways that I want. And so I want to connect for you about how to apply dignity to emotional regulation. So emotional regulation is about getting clear about your emotions, and it empowers you to define your experience. So for me, the thing that I have said to myself probably, I don't know, a million times over the last 18 months is emotions are real. They are real, but they are not permanent. You can change the way you feel. And this goes right to the heart of being able to say to a young person, your emotions and how you feel about something are completely legit. No one has the right to question you about the way you feel and your feelings about that. But the other person also has their feelings, and they have the right to their feelings. So nobody gets to say to anybody, I think you just took it the wrong way, or why does that word matter? Like all of the, you're just taking this wrong, or I didn't mean it that way, or anything like that. It really settles on and affirms and acknowledges people's experiences with their feelings. And so the more granular, the more specific we can all be to describe our feelings, the more options we have to understand and communicate them. So when a teacher says, I'm so exhausted, or I'm so stressed, or a student says, I'm so stressed, being able to unpack that, being able to describe more specifically and having the time to process those feelings gives us an ability to identify and acknowledge what's really happening. And that treats ourselves with dignity. And the more we can do that with our young people, the young people that we work with, the more we can understand what really is bothering them and be able to match the solution in a more consistent way with what they need, in a more effective way with what they need. So I think having emotional regulation is part of how we look at social emotional learning, and how we look at the principles of how we conduct ourselves is incredibly important. Just think about listening as being prepared to be changed by what you hear. So listening to yourself, listening to a young person is treating them with dignity. And then it gets us to a better ability to be able to understand them and be able to work with them to really be able to address the problems that they might be experiencing. So that's one way of looking at this. Oh, and of course, emotional intelligence, when we do this for all of us, no matter how old we are, goes up, and anxiety goes down. That's, sort of important. That's always really important, but my goodness, it's incredibly important for right now. I mean, the teacher prep calls I'm doing right now, people, the way that they are describing themselves is a sponge that is so absorbed with water that water is just pouring out. That was a visual that a teacher gave me last week about how they were feeling. So this, I'm so excited to share with you, is a Jamboard. And so you were asked me about, I'm going to do this for a second because my transition's not good. So some of the prep questions were asking me, again, how do I use technology with social emotional learning? And boy, is my learning curve been very steep in the last 18 months, but I'm doing all different kinds of things. And I wanted to share with you one of the things that we did last week. So we asked teachers about what were the social dynamics, or how do social dynamics impact the classroom? And one of the things that we know is that teachers tend to think about social dynamics in the classroom as a distraction, but they're not really a distraction. They're just actually ever present, and they just always are. And when a teacher says, and these are things we don't mean to say, we just grew up with them in our teaching, is that if, for example, after recess or after lunch or after those kinds of moments, when it's students come back into the classroom and they've had some kind of conflict or some kind of problem, it's really normal, it's really common for a teacher to say, leave that outside. That's impossible. You can't leave it outside. It comes into the classroom. You're asking a student to do something that is literally impossible for them to do. It's not just a student, it's all of us. If we had a faculty meeting where we had a conflict with somebody and we had to go do something and go into a learning environment, it would take us a while at the very least, no matter how emotionally mature we were, to be able to transition into focusing. And so we want to be able to ask students to be able to treat them with dignity means to acknowledge the actual life that they're living, which is that when they're 10 years old in grade 5 and they have a problem at recess because they were playing soccer or football and they got into a fight because somebody was was cheating, or somebody wanted a do-over, or something happened, there was just a conflict, and they come into the classroom, they can't just turn it off. If a conflict happens where somebody says something nasty or does something nasty on social media, or they find out about it in the lunchroom and they have to go into a classroom, they can't just turn it off. So we have to be able to acknowledge, and treating someone with dignity is acknowledging the possibility that they are having social interactions that come into the classroom and they can't immediately turn it off. So when we asked teachers in a training last week, what were those, what did they feel? One of the things that happened, which was really interesting, is the teachers need a push, because when we ask them about social dynamics, they tend to focus on how it impacts the kids. But we actually also have to ask the teachers about how it's impacting them as well. So I wanted to show you with that transition, how do your students' social dynamics impact you? So there were so many on our Jamboard that it went over the actual title of our Jamboard. So I want you to take a moment to look at what teachers are saying about social dynamics and their children and their students. It breaks my heart to see some of my students not nice to each other. There are other teachers who don't know my students and are afraid they may explode. Takes me back to my own middle school drama. It's exhausting to try and address social dynamics while simultaneously reaching content goals. And so this issue of, and you can use these things if this is helpful, and then ask your faculty if they can relate to it. This issue of, I can't focus on social emotional learning because I've got my learning objectives that I have to teach. When we ask teachers actually this question, well, the answer is right here, is that we don't actually address these issues of dignity, respect, of norms, of social emotional learning in an integrative way in the classroom, then this is the challenge that we have no matter what. And teachers know it, but we sometimes forget it and we just sort of plow ahead anyway. All right, so here's what I want to do. I want to show you, we have this issue. So now what do we do about it? So we're going to get more granular. I'm going to show you how to use it in a classroom that connects dignity with the tactics, social emotional learning. So we know that the problems of using generalized words like teasing and bullying are not helpful really to young people, because there's all different kinds of ways of behavior, of aggressive behavior. So the way that we define it as a starting place for young people is we define teasing in 3 different ways: with bonding, which is you feel liked or you don't feel put down and you'll stop if you're asked. Annoying teasing, that you don't know how you feel. The person usually will say something like, I was just joking or relaxed, but they're just trying to sort of move the conversation forward. They feel uncomfortable, but they don't really want to put you down. And malicious teasing, which is you're teased for your insecurities, you're uptight, you're sort of threatened with ending the relationship with the person or the alliance with the person if you complain about it, and it's relentless and in public, which of course obviously means being, with social media and a social media platform. So we've got these 3 types of teasing, but here's the thing. This has to come because young people are the subject matter experts of their lives. So we start with this, but then say, make it your own. Come up, you don't have to use the words bonding and annoying and malicious. You don't. You can use whatever words let's work as a group to figure out what are the words that really make sense here. And so they can also define it. So this is a starting place. I believe that social emotional learning tactics like this should be a starting place to then turn to the students and say, what do you think? Let's define it. Similarly is about bullying. So we know that young people will, and parents especially, will like any kind of aggression can now become bullying, which is not true. And so we need to be able to pull it apart. So here are the 4 definitions that I've come up with students. Rude is unintentionally excluding, isolating, hurting someone's feelings. Mean is intentionally excluding, isolating, or hurting someone's feelings. Drama is a conflict between people that is entertaining to everybody else. And bullying is repeatedly abusing power against another person. So when we're doing our diversity, equity, inclusion work, this really, we really need to focus on defining and pulling apart these words so that people don't get away with really hurtful behavior that makes people not feel included in a classroom or in our communities. So for all different kinds of reasons. So again, this is a starting place for conversation. So what I want to do now is I want to show you, I asked, this is the next thing that I did with the teachers, was a Jamboard of, well, you know, if we're going to use this with students and we're going to say, okay, what is the definition of these words? I'm going to treat the students with dignity by looking to them that we are going to work with them and that I see that they have inherent worth and that and I'm also going to respect their experiences, the experiences they've had, the actions that they've done towards these experiences. And so when we ask students, well, what are the definitions from your students' point of view? This is what the teachers wrote. They wrote, bullying is making fun of somebody. Anything mean or rude is bullying. Bullying equals not being nice. Drama are girl fights. Only girls have drama. Bullying, so drama is some event that everyone's talking about. So here, being mean is taking my pink shirt and not giving it back. Bullying is any unkind behavior. So here's another thing you can do, which brings students and their voice into the classroom, into your norming of your classroom, to say, you know, show them this Jamboard, or say you take one of them. Is anything mean or rude bullying? Yes or no? And then go from there to get more granular, to describe more what the complexities of the behavior are. And then you can use the definitions of rude and mean and drama and bullying and unpack that, or put more definitions or modify it so that students are seeing, you're not just starting from scratch because that's overwhelming. You're starting from a place of, here are some definitions that maybe we can modify to make our own. But we are doing it starting from a place of asking students, you know, what do you think? What are your experiences? And in that way, young people feel acknowledged, they feel their identity is seen, and they are contributing to the norms, building the norms of the classroom. And this for me is a sense of being able to take the things that we say that we want to do, that we say that we want to do, and putting them into action. And that's when our students take us seriously. That is when they take any social emotional learning program seriously. And that is when it's something that they can apply to their lives. And they can say, oh, there is a reason that I am doing all of this stuff. Instead of, frankly, just thinking about, like, let's be nice to each other. Not that social emotional learning programs are doing that, but oftentimes what happens is we get to a place where where young people are really having a hard time really focusing on how to apply it. All right, so we're moving into the time of questions and answers and thoughts and all of that stuff. So I want to prime you all for that. And I hope, for those of you who sent me questions beforehand, that I've been, trying to integrate them as we go. And so here's what I just want to move forward. One more thing. Yeah, I'm right at the right place that I wanted to be. So with that, the last thing that I want to do is I want to give a couple of sentence scripts that connect back to our principles and connect back to the feeling of giving a young person dignity. So what I've just finished is giving you some activities that you can do for the classroom. But, as we know, if teachers like children and they treat them with dignity, our students and young people are going to come to us with our problems. And so it can be really difficult for teachers to know what to say in the moment because we don't often get trained in that. And so I wanted to give you just a few sentence scripts so that we can think to be able to show in our words in those little moments, in those little quiet moments, not when all the kids are around. But when a young person comes to a teacher and says, I'm having a problem, I don't know what to do, that teachers really need to have some sentence scripts to start with, that they need to make it their own. But again, starting with a place of, oh, here's a foundation that really I know grounds my words in dignity, and treating that child with dignity. So if you remember from our principles, I had a principle of validate, don't relate. And so when a child comes to a teacher and says they're having a problem, one of the things that we want to say is something like, I was your age once, so there are some things I can relate to, but you're having your own experiences and you're growing up in a really different time. I want to listen to you first and let me know if you want advice. So that's a validation and not a relation, right? Or, I mean, again, because I know that you've got your DEI workshops right around the corner. If I'm, which I am, a white Jewish teacher, female, and I'm talking to a young Black man, am I going to say, I know what it was like, I was your age once too, it gets better? No, I'm not. That is disrespectful to his life experience. It is imperative that I say to him, you know what? I was young, I was a teenager once, but I don't know what it's like to be you. I really don't. And so I need to listen to you first and really hear what hear your experiences, hear what you feel comfortable telling me, so that then I will, and only then will I be able to have the possibility of helping you and guiding you. So I think it's a really important thing to be able to acknowledge difference amongst people, because that ironically, actually, I think brings us together. Here's another sentence script I'd like for us to think about. So if a child comes, just that initial moment of getting, so we can get more emotionally granular with students, no matter how old they are. I'm really sorry that happened. Thank you for trusting me to tell me. Can you give me a little more details so I can have a better understanding of your feelings and why? And so we're encouraging the student to take these big, messy feelings. I don't care if they're 5 or 15. It's that they're taking those big feelings that are so hard to express sometimes and giving them the time and place to process and the ability to be able to give more words to what they're feeling, so that they have a better idea of it and we have a better idea of it. And then the last one is when students will say to you things like, I'm going to tell you this, but you have to promise not to tell. So this is complicated because we want sometimes to be able to say, okay, but then we worry about, because you've done, all of these things on child protection. You want to make sure that you abide by those rules of being able to tell somebody if you need to. So that's a really important thing you want to do. So you're caught in between two really important needs. And so instead you can say, I can't make that promise, but I can promise if we need to involve another adult, we will choose that person together. Because again, is it about acknowledging the risk that young person is taking? You are seeing their worth. You are seeing the risk they took to tell you. They're seeing, you are acknowledging the experiences that they have. That recognition is incredibly important. And so these are 3 things, 3 sentence scripts that we can give teachers, so that when they're doing a million things and a student comes up to them and says, can I talk to you for a moment? That they know what to say, and that they really they can stop and they can focus, and then they can make sure that they are seeing, that they really see the dignity of that child and that their behavior matches that feeling that they have inside. So with that, I'd love to turn it over. So Kelly, you are up. I'm going to take my Prezi videos off, so you only get me. Kelly, let's do some more questions that I didn't get to, and let's go for it. Let's see how many questions I can answer in our remaining time.
Great. Thank you so much, Rosalind. I have to tell you, I'm still feeling warm and fuzzy and positive just thinking about spending time thinking about my grandparents at the beginning of this, when you asked the question about respect. And it was so easy to come up with who I respected, but it was really meaningful to spend a few minutes thinking about how I take that respect I had for them to implement it into my relationships with people now. I think I probably knew that somewhere deep down, but I haven't taken the time to really think about that before. So thank you. That was a really wonderful framing exercise that I think probably many of us will use in the future. We do have some questions from the registration forms and from the chat, but I'd encourage you as we go here, if anyone else has additional questions, you can still feel free to share them and chat them in. But I wanted to start at a place that's a little bit different from where we were in this presentation, which is that these are, as they're essential skills, but there is a softness to them, right? There is a personal approach to them. And so we do get a lot of questions about how do we assess impact of social and emotional learning programs. So we're moving the conversation from respect to dignity, and how do we look at what the impact is and what the outcomes really are in the classroom? If you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so so obviously an incredibly complex issue. And I think it's also another elephant in the room and can get uncomfortable for people. So, there are wonderful tools out there to evaluate social emotional learning. I happen to like the panorama questions that are asked quite a bit. I happen to like that tool, and I've seen it used, I've seen it used successfully in schools. And there are other tools that are used, I'm just going to say it. What I'm going to say is that we often depend on the evaluation tools that are supported by institutions, and they're and adults that are in those institutions, and they're very good to be able to talk to funders or to board members or to be able to say in our work in our schools. But here's the thing. I think when we're talking about finding out if social emotional learning is working for our students, I think we have to ask our students. And I don't just mean like taking a survey and surveying them. What I mean is I think we need to ask, we need to use this as an opportunity to have young people be a voice in looking at the tool that we're using, and maybe even deciding what tool we use. And maybe, and I know this is not, safe, but working with students to develop survey questions. If you're in a high school, for example, and you have a statistics teacher in a statistics class, why not have that as a project to create a survey that doesn't have leading questions, for example? For example, I'm very, very bad, as in good, at making leading questions. I am not credible in the making of questions because I'm constantly asking leading questions. I need someone to say that's a leading question. But why not use that as a project to be able to create a survey that the students in the school knew that their students in their school created a survey, and that after they did the survey, that then the statistics class or a group of students then shared that with the rest of the students, and then presented that information, and then use that as a way to inform your social emotional learning. So I don't want to take away from very important tools that we need to have, but we also need to acknowledge that we need to use students more in evaluating whether or not the social emotional learning we're doing is working for them. And without that, I think we get to a place where the work sometimes is not reflective of the context in which they are living.
Thank you so much. So another question that we have is what about particularly resistant students or student populations? The one that was posed specifically was middle school boys. But of course, there can be all sorts of different resistant populations to this kind of work. I know that this is an area of specialty for you.
The difficult
middle
children.
School and middle school and the teen years. And so if you could talk to us just a little bit about kind of practical advice for those students or populations that may be resistant to these conversations.
So I'm going to take a step back, and I think it connects to what I just said. And I'll tell you two experiences I've had recently. One is I was working with a group of people, so well-meaning, and their responsibility is to go in and talk to middle school, actually 8th grade boys, about what they first said to me is the program wasn't working. I saw them like the second week of September, and it was already like they'd done 2 classes, and it was just a disaster. The children were nasty, they were rude, they were entitled, which I think is that word to me is a loaded word. A lot of words that we describe for young people, we need to, I think, sort of look in the mirror first. But they were just so frustrated because they weren't behaving, they didn't care. So I said to the teachers, well, what are you teaching? And they said goal setting. And I can just take a moment. You have a teacher who doesn't know anything about you, who comes into a class and says, now we're going to teach you about goal setting. But they haven't asked you about what your passions are, what your purpose is, or about, how does this goal setting fit into your life? How does it make sense to you? And so one of the things we need to do is we need to stop. We need to stop and about what we think they need, and then ask them, well, what are the things you'd like to learn about? Like, what do you think are the things you need to be a competent person in this world who can go through life sort of being able to take care of themselves. And I mean, I can't tell you how many high school people we've asked this question to, and they say things like fix a tire, like fix a tire, a flat tire, which makes a lot of sense. And if you don't know how to do that, that's a skill you need to learn how to do. And so we need to ask them that. So a goal would be learning how to fix a tire. A goal would be to learn how to understand how to open a bank account or those kinds of things. So we have to ask them what actually means something to them. And then we fit our learning and our wisdom, which we have, onto their goals. And when that happens, you get to a much different place of engagement. That's the first thing. The second thing is about language. So I, again, like last week, had to tell a principal who I love, who's so passionate about doing this work. And I was talking to, she had a program. It was, again, it was 7th and 8th graders. And this was a group of people. These kids were a part of a group at the school that the principal was very proud of, and it was the ambassador program. Lots of schools have them. And these children are responsible for talking about the school, and also, you know, all of the things about like programs about how to make the school good, or like orientations for the 6th grade. And so I asked the students 2 questions. I said to them, in a roundabout way, not a leading question, I just can't, so I have to ask you, because the principal loves the word upstander. She loves that word. And I have a feeling that upstander, from all the work I do, that usually those words are blown off by kids. And so when I asked the students in the ambassador program, should we use the word upstander when we're talking about the work you do? And so many of the students, like all of them, said, can you please not use that word? Please, no one takes us seriously when the principal uses that word. So then my job is to go back to the principal and say to the principal, you know how much I love your work, and you can't use the word bystander anymore. But then what do you use? I mean, that's the important thing. And then she should go to the students, and she's going to the students and saying, okay, get it. I'm not going to use the word bystander anymore because upstander anymore, because it takes away your credibility. So, and takes away my credibility when I use it. So what word should we use? Let's get more granular. Let's use the words that, you know, that make sense for us in this community. And then we get more ownership. So I would say that if you're working with difficult students, there's always a good reason why they're difficult. Meaning there's an understandable reason. And we've got to figure out what that is. And when we figure out what that is, then we get ownership. And when we get ownership, we can hold them accountable for the norms of how they're conducting themselves in the classroom, or in the group, or in the school, or in the hallway, or in the dining room, or in the athletic, you know, on their teams, in a whole different way, because they see that the principles that we're applying then the rules that we have on those norms are based on principles that they have bought into and have contributed to.
Thank you. And we just have a few minutes left, so this will be a quick one, but
oh no,
we had a spin-off question. I know the time moved very quickly. A spin-off question about what about resistant adults? So
right.
parents,
that is not a short question, Kelly.
Yeah, it's not a short question. A couple parting tips on that topic. I know it's a big one.
Absolutely. So I think that there has to be, from the administration, a role modeling of you never stop learning. And because something is uncomfortable, as adults, we are going to move into being appropriately uncomfortable. But this is where dignity is so important, is that when we say that dignity is honoring the inherent worth of people, and that we cannot do that if we don't lean into I don't tend to like that word. So if we don't engage in things that make us uncomfortable, then we are going to create a classroom environment where students cannot take the academic risks that they need to. And so but actually the exercise I did with you on the dignity and respect, and asking the teachers about who they respect or didn't respect, and how that influences their teaching today, really can shift it begins to move. I feel like those teachers are stuck. That's the way that I feel. Like I see them as being stuck, and we want them to get a little unstuck. And so I think it's really important to give them that leverage of like, we're just moving you a little bit, but that exercise can really help. And actually, I want to use a quote that Reginald Roberts, the principal from Norwalk High School, that was on one of your previous webinars. And I think he said it, and I think this is the kind of leadership that we need to hear to get those teachers to feel unstuck. which is this. He said, SEL isn't one thing. It's not one curriculum. It's all of it. And I'm going to miss some things sometimes, and then I'm going to try again tomorrow. And so I think what I take away from Mr. Roberts's quote is that you're not off the hook. No one's off the hook here about teaching social emotional learning. Isn't one thing, and we're going to make mistakes, and we're going to keep doing it. Because it's about why we actually are in school. It is about, literally, this is not what he said, but it is about the foundation of why we are in school. And so if we can level set on that and say, this is what we believe, and therefore our behavior has to be an extension of that, then I think we get to a place where teachers who are stuck feel that this is what it means to be a part of this community. And so this is what it means to be a part of this community. And so this is what we're doing. And yet there's also a place to make mistakes, and that you can make mistakes and we can move on. So it provides space and dignity for the teachers as well to learn.
Thank you so much. That's a great way to wrap it up. Rosalind, thank you for your time this morning. We have attendees from all over the world, and I know we're all just so appreciative for you sharing your time and your insights with us. Really appreciate all of your attendance. Thank you again, and we'll see you on November 2nd.
Bye, thank you.
Thank you.